Hello, everyone. This is Dale Allen, president of Dexterra. I wanted to welcome you all to today's EagleApps community webinar series. Want to make sure we can welcome everyone in, provide a little overview, and get right into today's session. First of all, thank you for joining us for this ongoing series. We began this with an introductory session that occurred on March 19th about EagleApps in general, and that's available for everyone's review on our website. There you can learn more about EagleApps features, the need for the development of this product by Boston College, and probably for many of us, the functional and technical overviews and architecture and implementation for this application-based student information system. We are really pleased today that we have folks that are joining us with interest in EagleApps and in joining this community from across Europe, from India, from Canada, and across the United States. So during these challenging times where we're all a little too distant from each other as we normally have been, we hope that everyone is safe, strong, and well, and really appreciate your joining us today. All of our sessions will be recorded and will be available on the EagleApps page of the Dexterra website. Let me just mention a little bit about Dexterra to give you the 30-second overview of that before I ask our partners at Boston College and their CIO, Mike Burke, to join us as well to do the same. So first of all, Dexterra is a growing international nonprofit consortium that develops shared solutions to transform the ability to control, utilize, and exchange information amongst products when you want and where you want. We lead this through shared communities to bring these solutions to our members and to hopefully transform and change the education market. Our priorities as a collective group are around developing next generation education systems like EagleApps, developing business intelligence solutions, and working on integration solutions to reduce the burden between products. We are partnering and are pleased to partner with Boston College to grow the EagleApps community, to bring together institutions and interested parties from around the world to help better understand the parameters of an EagleApps implementation and to launch this global community of practitioners and contributors. This community is expected to guide the ongoing development of this enterprise level product and enable its ongoing evolution, and I'll provide more detail in a bit. With that, I'd like to pause and ask my partner and colleague, Mike Burke, who is the Vice President and CIO of Boston College, to share a brief welcome and some perspective from his side. Mike?
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for hosting this, Dale. And thanks for the partnership with Dexterra. On behalf of Boston College, I want to thank you. And thanks to all of you taking part. I'll try to be brief here. And thank you for taking time from your busy schedule during such a crazy time to do this. I just wanted to spend 2 minutes at the beginning to emphasize what our journey has been here, because this has been a journey for us. We started out shortly after the last economic crisis and joined a consortium called Koali. And what we really loved about that was the idea of the value of a community that would drive the design in terms of functionality, drive the design in terms of technology, and drive the longevity and the supportability of the product long term. Ultimately, for a variety of reasons, that fell apart, and Boston College had to reassess its options. And we looked at what was available in the market. We didn't find anything that fit our technological model. We were looking for this services-oriented architecture, service contract-based model that we're using on a very broad basis on our campus, and something that we could afford to implement, something that we could do in an incremental, modular manner that would be extensible and integratable, whether it was here on campus or in the cloud or whatever combination of that. So it's been a long journey, but the vision included that technology, that function, and that community for the support. And now, as we've made a lot of progress, we have some modules up and running. We've actually seen the benefit in real life of being actually able to change the system from our long in the tooth legacy system to actually make changes in real time and have users be able to configure things based on business rules in their domain and not need programming to support it. It's been great. So now, as we move forward, we're you know, we've got the architecture, we've got the functionality, the scalability, the extensibility, and now we're looking to build a community. So we're not the only school on earth that ever takes advantage of this. And we think that we can actually support it more in the long term. There's the old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go long, go together. And we needed to go fast and get it done. And we did that on our own. But now we're looking for the long run, and we're looking to build a community of partners, like-minded partners that would benefit from this model. And I'm actually thinking now, given the economic reality, at least here in the States, and it's probably not a lot different for our international partners, is, you know, what is the affordability of doing these big, massive ERP systems? Something like EagleApps is incremental, is modular, is extensible, and is achievable, I think, at different scales. So we appreciate you taking the time. We look forward to, you're going to learn some good stuff today in terms of getting down and understanding the reality of how this system is designed and how it's built. And I appreciate you taking the opportunity from your busy schedules. Look forward to connecting with you through these series and offline, whatever. But the partnership with Dexterra, I think, is really helping us maintain our focus on having a great product here, but also having an outside perspective to say, how can that product foster a community, and a community that would serve us all well as partners. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And I'm quite certain you're going to enjoy what you're going to see.
Great, thanks, Mike. And again, today is just a reminder of the Boston College and Dexterra collaboration, as you see on the screen, is really about focusing and facilitating this engaged community, which you're all will be, you know, exploring through this and understanding more about the product, and hopefully joining into the community as we go forward. And then we're also looking to do implementation studies, which the fourth event in our series will be about that study. And this is a chance for some of you to be more engaged and directly testing and deploying this product to help address some of your needs, but also helping us guide the how do you implement, what are the best ways, how do we document that, and how can we go forward with that? So again, in a shared kind of way. Some logistics before we get going. All are recorded, as I said before, and available on the EagleApps site. On the bottom of your screen, generally on the bottom, with Zoom, you have the ability to do question and answer, chat, or raise your hand. Feel free to use the chat with everyone. We do want to get as much engagement as we can with people and hear from you directly. And the question and answer, same thing. If it's a question relevant to what's going on, we'll try to get it addressed immediately. At the end of the session, we will also do a question and answer as well at the end for any remaining items. And we can continue discussions offline as well. We think the questions and answers are really important because they do help us shape the frequently asked questions information that we can share with other people. And again, we do have an EagleApps. At the end of this, I'll have an email address that you can use for any specific questions for EagleApps that can, if you want to share those with us. Today's session is about the introduction and course lifecycle management. This is the first session of the web series. It'll focus on one slice of functionality related to the various tools for managing and tracking the lifecycle of courses, including course creation, competency mapping, instructor assignment, aligning with the academic calendar, etc. Boston College's specific implementation will be demonstrated, and the underlying models that allow EagleApps to be used would allow for flexibility across various institutional environments will be presented. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to one of our presenters, Tom Capetto, but he's going to be joined by Linda McCarthy and Dan Higgins. They're all with Boston College, and then we share Tom as a senior architect with Dexterra. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Tom.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So as Dale introduced, we're going to give you a little more in-depth slice about courses and setting up of those courses in terms with their logistical information. In the last session, we introduce the concept that EagleApps is composed of a modular service environment on which we build applications. The functional domains that the service environment describes a large chunk of what exists throughout the enterprise. So it's fairly complex. We have a lot of different areas, and inside each of those areas, we have a lot of very specific problems or models that describe how it is that we're going to design and build something. We cannot go deeply into all of these areas. So in our last session, we kind of flew by very quickly at about 100,000 feet. We're going to be going a little deeper today and focusing on curriculum, specifically around courses and course offerings, which is a course that is offered within a specific time period or a term. So our, though all pun intended, our learning objective today is just to gain a little bit more understanding onto the course life cycle. And my introduction here will basically just try to set the stage so you have a little bit of a conceptual backing of what Dan is going to demo shortly. So before I get into the course flow, my little disclaimer that I work largely in the architecture and design area of this project. So I tend to talk a lot about capabilities, which sometimes can vary a little bit with what you see in the user interface demos. So I talk about capabilities and implementation scenarios, customizations, and how it is we can be data driven so that things are kind of changing depending on what people set up and what people enter into the system. The demonstrations you will see with the UIs, that's demonstrating Boston College data, their implementation and their setup. So, many of you come to learn about EagleApps and very specifically to see how it might be applicable in your situation. So I'm going to be a little broad, and I may raise some eyebrows at Boston College about some of the other capabilities that maybe Boston College isn't taking full advantage of yet. So the course flow. It starts with defining a course, and I mean the curriculum definition of a course. And as we go through, we'll see that a course, we try to focus it strictly on the curricular definition. I know many of you from UOC are listening, and we've worked a lot over the years with you on learning objectives. So my nickname for a course is a bag of learning objectives. All of the logistical information, a lot of the administrative information is not really part of the course, but we'll see how that kind of weaves in as we go along. In addition to learning objectives, we may talk about requisites, and these courses may be applied to satisfying requirements in programs. Now, programs, although intertwined in curriculum management, is a little out of scope for today's webinar, but we're going to focus on the course itself. When we want to offer a course in a particular term, in this case, you'll see Math 1801 being offered for fall of 2020, it is at this stage of the game that we bring in a lot of the logistical information about when that course is meeting, who may be teaching it, what its capacities are, and so forth. So a course offering is essentially a course in a term, plus a bunch of logistical information to manage the registration process. And that brings us to the next step, which is my course registration for the course. And so if I'm registered for Math 1801, I will see a course registration between me and the instance of Math 1801 that is offered in the fall of 2020. This eventually percolates up to what we call the student course record. This is a piece of the academic record services that roll up information and report on what the student is doing or what the student has done in the past, and even potentially what we expect the student to do in the future. So I would expect to see a student course record pop up at some point that says I'm registered in the course. Now, if I have completed the course, either good or bad, then that will feed into our grading services where I could be assigned or awarded a grade. And that too will roll up into the student course record of the academic record. So if you remember from the last session, the academic record is kind of a roll-up of all of these transactions that are occurring within course registration and grading and many other services. That may, again, percolate over to my program entry in the academic record service for things like how many credits have I attempted this term, what are the total number of credits I've earned, and eventually my GPA calculation. But today, we're just going to focus on course and course offering. So let's start with course. So let's say that I'm defining a course and I know that I want to have a couple of pieces of that course. That there's going to be a lecture and there's going to be a discussion group. So we call these activities. And they basically describe the different kinds of activities from a curricular standpoint of that is occurring in this course. These activities in turn are tied together into what we call a format. So I created a format, I just called it the traditional format, which always comes with a lecture and a discussion group. There may be many other formats that one can create, and a course can have more than one format, which means that it can be taught in different ways. So here I defined a new kind of format for an experimental mode of teaching where there is just one big study group that meets together and learns the material in the class. There may be also an online format where maybe it's done through video conferencing or some other distance learning tool. You can have as many formats as you want, but it is expected that if a student were to register at an offering in any of these formats, that the same learning objectives defined at the course level are satisfied. So in other words, if Math 1801 is used as a prerequisite or a requirement for completing a program, then any of these formats will do. If that's not the case, then it's kind of implies that that format is probably really a different course with different learning objectives. So this is an example of courses can be broken down to describe curriculum at a more granular level. We can go the other way, and we can begin snapping courses together to make bigger pieces of curriculum or bigger courses. So we like to call those multi-courses. So let's say that I wanted to combine Math 1801 and Physics 801, and I wanted to think of it as a single piece of curriculum, even though I have two courses that already exist. Maybe I want to do that so I understand the curriculum better, I want to define learning objectives at a higher level, or I want to provide later on a single point of registration so that students are registered in both. So what we do is we take those two existing courses and we wrap them together in a multi-course structure. Multi-courses can be sequenced by term, so that can have an intent of saying, these are the courses as part of this multi-course registration that the student will take in a fall term, and then in the next spring term, they'll take the follow-on courses. And I can keep doing that as much as I want. Often when people start structuring courses like this, another name that people use is defining a lockstep program. And yes, a multi-course can contain other multi-courses so that I can build bigger and bigger pieces of curriculum. And so even though programs are kind of out of scope, but if you have lockstep programs, this is the kind of mechanism you might be looking at. Now, learning objectives. So I come back to Math 1801. We can assign learning objectives. And apologies for those who have worked with me in learning objectives before. I always insist that learning objective name should always have a verb in it. I didn't because the boxes are really small. So we have a learning objective about learning something about calculus. And learning objectives, as Norm Wright would call it, are first-class citizens. In other words, they are managed objects and they can be created and managed independently. They can be related to the course, but they exist in their own right. If those of you are familiar with MIT's MC3 project, where Jeff Merriman built a system that does nothing but manage learning objectives. So there's a lot of interest in this area to describe and be able to translate material curriculum in one course and be able to understand its applicability in a course that may be offered elsewhere. So learning objectives are part of a hierarchy and they can be broken down and they can be broken down again. And you can keep breaking down those learning objectives into whatever detail you'd like. You can even begin splitting apart those learning objectives into different activities that are defined in the course. Consequently, you could also build up, but you will eventually get to a level of learning objective that may be suitable for understanding an entire program. And every learning objective, we can track results or competencies, or what we call in the service environment here, proficiencies, for a student in what they know about that learning objective. And that comes with its own grading scale. And we have results that are in grades that are the product of courses, but then we can come over to the learning objective side and understand what competencies the student actually has. So we can do that on either side. Another big chunk of curriculum management, both in the core product and at Boston College, is the workflow. So in a very straightforward environment, somebody can sit in front of an application and simply create courses and update courses. But often in universities, there is at the very least an approval process that must, where the course must travel, and that may also result in other activities or tasks that one needs to do before that course goes into production. An update of the course can just change the information about that existing course, or we can create what we call a new revision of that course. And these are intended to be major changes to a course that may affect its requirements or the requirements of where that course was applied. And so although we can have a revision history of a bunch of changes to a course where it has the same title and the same course code, internally in the system, we treat them actually at different courses. So the revision, say revision 2 of Math 1801 may not satisfy the core math requirement at the university, but it has been changed and revision 3 can be used to satisfy that requirement. So this is yet another dimension to curriculum management. But in course proposals, all workflow submissions are wrapped in a request, a course proposal request. These course proposals, they may contain multiple line items. So the capability exists so that multiple courses can be bundled together so that somebody is reviewing and approving the entire set of courses rather than seeing them come in one at a time. Or it may be wrapped in the same request that's part of a program proposal. So here's my new idea for a program, and our committee came up with a bunch of courses, and you should see the whole thing before approving it for offering. And these requests may contain other information that are helpful for the workflow and approval process that's not and does not belong in the course itself. And so there may be justifications, or there may be other pieces of information to let people who are participating in that workflow know what to do. So a proposal for a request actually creates the course object. So we work on the course object from when the workflow starts all the way through to the very end. And so here we have a proposal that somebody wants to create in economics class 3145. And while that person is putting in all the information and maybe thinking about learning objectives and thinking about what the description ought to be, it's sitting in a draft state, which means it's just visible to the person who is creating it, but it hasn't entered the approval process yet. Once it is submitted into workflow for approval, the first step is now inside the workflow engine. And by the way, Boston College, we decided to take our workflow service interface definitions and implement them against the open source workflow engine activity. And so that's what we're currently using. And eventually it gets routed, that request, based on roles and based on other rules in the workflow system to somebody who is going to approve or reject the course. And so here we are waiting for our approval. There it is, we are approved. And often there's some additional work that needs to be done. Maybe it's somebody else is in charge of assigning the course code or managing the cross listings or what have you. But once we get to the end of the workflow, we now have an active course in the system. Now, how do we tell the system that we have an active course and it's ready to go? We actually we enable it for offering. And this little red box here, we call an offering enabler. And what it does is it describes all of the rules in which Econ 3145 may be offered. So when does that start? Does it go on in perpetuity until we yank this offering enabler away? Or is it a pilot that we only want to offer for 1 year? Which department is going to be offering it? Could be offered any time, or is it a summer term only course? And what are the other constraints that will eventually govern what can happen with the course offering later in the course lifecycle? So a course offering, again, is just a course that is offered in a term. It looks a lot like the curriculum definition, except with all of the logistical additions. And so anytime we talk about registration restrictions or time of day or anything else, we're really talking about doing that on the course offering side. And we don't do that on the curriculum side. And there's often a need that we want to kind of store some information or some data that we don't have to enter that in to the course offering each and every term. Now we know rollover is one of the mechanisms in which things can be copied down from term to term, but the other place we stash that so we don't confuse the curriculum definition is we use those offering enabler rules to put that information. And although I only talked about course offering, they're also offering counterparts for the formats and activities. The activities, we call those activity offerings on the offering side, and those are a lot like your sections, excuse me. And those will be, where scheduling is very important. So can the course offering be changed from the curriculum definition? And I will say that depends. At Boston College, they have decided that there were only certain pieces of the course offering that they were willing to have vary from the curriculum definition. And in our experience, that is kind of seems relatively organized and tight. I have worked with other schools where their policies are that a course offering may be changed at any time and have nothing to do with its curriculum definition, a little bit more of the Wild West, if you will. But those constraints are really managed by the rules that are implemented, and those rules are customizable. So if we look at the entire picture of a course, my little center circle here in red, these are all of the things that could be managed around a course to make the complete picture. So of course, we're talking about learning objectives. Dan will show how you assign credits and grade results that are independently managed. They're offered by organizations, so we need to worry about where we get our organizational hierarchy from, and services to do that, and all the way around the circle. And so in an implementation study, this is, from a curricular point of view, these are the different areas that such a group would be looking at to try to understand, how to set up and how to configure and how to customize to get courses ready to be offered in a term. Okay, and with that, I will hand it over to Dan so he can show you some real things in action.
Thank you, Tom. And I am going to share. All right, can people see my screen here now?
Yes, we can, Dan.
Excellent. All right, so Tom just covered a lot of the different tools and mechanisms we're using for setting up a semester and setting up a department's courses. And I'm going to walk us through kind of the entire process of getting ready for a term, or at least most of it. So to set a little bit of context here, the first step between setting up this term is from an administrative side. So we're going to be looking as if we were in the registrar's office, where the very first thing we are going to do is we're going to go over and take a look at the academic calendar for a given term. So within our academic calendar, we want to make sure that we have our various key dates set up for the upcoming term. So we see things, last day to withdraw from a class. We have add drop days, last day of classes. And beneath those, we can have independent subterms set up for each of these. So instead of just setting key dates for everything at the kind of parent level, our parent terms here, fall, spring, and summer, we have each individual one that can each have their own key dates associated with them. We can go in, we can modify these and make adjustments. But then once we are actually ready to move forward with our academic calendar for a year, so the 21-22, we are going to do what's called a rollover, which we are going to take one of these terms. So we're actually going to take the fall of 2020 and roll it into the fall of 2021. Now, it's a process that's going to recreate the entirety of that fall term. It's going to include all of the format offerings, course offerings, activity offerings, instructors, as well as the schedules of those courses themselves. Now, we've already run one of these because it's a little bit, so the process takes a fair bit of time to run. So I'm going to show you the results of the one that we ran here. So we actually ran this from 2018 fall into 2021 fall. And here we see the entirety of the semester for all of the courses. Now, there is functionality that could allow us to do this on a smaller scale and roll over either a subterm or potentially even just department to department. But right now at BC, we're going to roll over the entirety of the term to include everything. Now, you see, so we had 1,870 course offerings that came over, as well as 1,869 formats and about 3,750 as far as courses. Now, we also see that we have a number of skipped items here. If I scroll down, this acts as our report, or an initial report around some of the details about what happened in that rollover. It initially starts out to be configured. I just want to see the things that were skipped or I had an error on. And I see that, Europe and the world was actually canceled in the source term. So when the rollover went back and looked at that, it doesn't just copy the item from one term to the next, it actually attempts to recreate it. So if an instructor had retired, it would appear here as the instructor didn't roll over because they're no longer active. If a room, if we were doing construction on campus and there was a room that went offline, then I would get a result here that said the scheduling of a specific section didn't roll over properly because that room got smaller and didn't fit into the course that was actually is supposed to go in there for the upcoming term. So those are the things that from behind the scenes, before departments get involved, we as our student services systems team are going to go in and be managing. Now once that is done, we will turn this over to the departments. So once the departments are going to begin getting into this, we are going to switch context now. So I'm going to act as the department administrator for the Earth and Environmental Sciences department. So this is I'm going to go in and take a look, and these are the courses that I'm going to be offering in the upcoming term as Earth and Environmental Science. I see a number of these indicators, a little bit more information about each of these. Something, exploring the Earth has a co-requisite. Environmental issues and resources is cross-listed with another course. And we have a number of different things that we can display here about these. But if, for example, I wanted to view my own rollover results within this department, I come over here and I get a better sense of what is actually happening here. I had 35 courses come over. I had 56 activity offerings and 26 exams attached to this. And when I go into the rollover that was actually run, get a little bit of info on the larger sense of the term for everybody. But then as I scroll down, I actually see the 3 items I have out there that did not roll over properly. So this is a starting point for a department that they might want to go in and take a look and evaluate what sort of information is there for their term. If I want to view everything that happened, I can go and update this filter and then see my entire term, things that were created successfully as well as those that ended up getting skipped. I'm going to go back to my list of course offerings. And we can say over the course of the past year, we realized that there was an additional course that we want to offer in the upcoming term that we haven't offered before, that was never created, that we're going to create from scratch to start out because it wasn't part of the rollover. And so I'm going to go in and create a course. And we're going to see, and within here, we're going to see a lot of information and a lot of the items that Tom was just talking about previously. So here, I'm going to create the geology. We're going to create the geology of New England. And we have multiple titles here, titles and names here that can be displayed. We can keep these differently. We can have some of them auto-generate if we're looking to fill a specific standard. But right now, we're just going to use a consistent name. For subject code, we're going to go Earth and Environmental Science. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail around just typing in descriptions and things now. But this is going to be roughly a junior level course. Now, we have some fields in here that aren't necessary for us. These instructor fields here are not for the course, the individual sections that are going to be taught, but are instructors that will display on the catalog if we would like that to display within our catalog as well. Maybe a high profile instructor is teaching something that we want to make sure is always associated with this course. Same thing goes for populations. I said it's going to be roughly a junior level course, but I'm not going to limit there, and I'm not going to publish in the catalog that it's only supposed to be for them. It's going to be a course that lasts 1 semester. And I'm going to say this course can be taken either letter or pass-fail. It is going to have a final exam. It's going to be a standard final exam. We have some different options on what we can do with final exams there. And then for the number of credits, I have my list here, and I'm going to say this is going to be actually a 4-credit course. It does not have a course fee. I'm going to go to my next screen here. So this is going to be an undergraduate level course, and it's going to cover a natural science. Now, this UI here is actually more to provide context for the person approving the course. These aren't actually the same requirements that are going to drive our degree audit or anything else. This is informational. We are trying to build out all of the info around the course that's needed here. So these are the 2 things that we want to have displayed with this course. Now, here we are seeing the format that that Tom was discussing before. And we're going to say this course can be offered as a lecture because we have one instructor that is only teaching 25 students, but we also have a much larger way to offer this course that, because the instructor can't give as much one-on-one help, we're going to make it a lecture discussion as well. So there are multiple ways that this course can be consumed for full credit. For a requisite here, I'm actually going to say that we're going to have a prerequisite for this that's going to be want to make sure that people have taken Exploring the Earth before they've actually taken this this course. So I'm adding that, and we'll see where it comes into play later. Now, maybe I also want to include a cross-listing within this. So it's not only Earth and Environmental Science, it's also the Environmental Studies department. It can be offered as either. And so if a student was to search for this course, it's the same course, but it can be seen in multiple ways. If I want to provide any additional instructions to the registrar's office that's going to be approving that, I can include that here. Now, this is the enabler that Tom was talking about earlier, where the first time we're going to be able to take this course is 2021. That's when this is first going to be available to us. We're also going to include that it's going to be offered every single fall, but we're not going to put additional restrictions on it right now. Now I'm going to go in, review. I can see all of the information that I've just put in here. It looks good. I can also see the catalog view of what would display here. This is another area, just reviewing the data, seeing if I was updating this course, I would see what was here previously. And now I'm going to finish, and I am going to submit that course. Now, typically this course would go for approval to the registrar's office. It would start off with the department and then move over into the registrar's office. We have this, we are going to assume that this was just approved. And I'm going to go back over into my course offering list now for Earth and Environmental Sciences. Now, I didn't just create that course in the term I was looking at. I created that course just in the catalog view, in our curriculum. That course now exists at Boston College, but I want to make sure that that course is offered within the fall of 2021. So I'm going to go in and take a look. And now I'm going to go into and see some of my details. Now, most of these are settings that I just defined a moment ago. If I was to go in and I wanted to say that it was going to be pass-fail instead by default, here's where I'm setting a bunch of the defaults for the sections that I am creating beneath this. So I'm going to save this. And now it's going to bring me into the screen where now I am managing all of the formats and sections of Geology of New England for the fall of 2021. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a format. So these are the two formats that we had created before. We had both a lecture and a lecture discussion. I'm going to start off by creating a lecture discussion here and just taking a look. I'm going to leave it letter graded, but I could update that if I want. I could also add some additional restrictions. I'm going to leave that blank for now. I'm moving forward, and now I see that, so I have one format here. So the format is really how this course is going to be consumed for us. And then we get into the sections, which are really what we think of it, that the student is, how the student's going to experience the course, where we get into details like, and I'm going to start off by creating the lecture first, like the number of students that are going to be taking it. So, so we're going to say this course has 55 students that are going to be taking it. And now I have my line item here where I'm going to first, I know that we are going to have, someone's going to need to be teaching this course. So we're going to go ahead and so Linda McCarthy is going to be teaching us about the geology of New England. And I now have Linda here teaching the course. If I actually was a little bit too high with this, I have some inline editing capabilities where I can drop this down to 50. And, but I'm not ready to actually move this into a new state of planned or anything yet, because the course is not fully set up. I'm also going to add 2 discussion groups for this course. And I'm going to skip the max enrollment for the moment. And I am now actually going to add a TA to teach these discussion groups. And I think I am actually going to be the one that's going to teach this section. And so now I have a discussion group. I'm actually going to copy this one and duplicate it. So now that I have two discussions and then this one lecture. Because we have 50 seats in the main, we need to make sure that we have enough seats in our discussion sections to actually line it up. And now we have this, and now we have some of the initial information that's needed around these specific sections. You'll notice schedule is still blank. So the next thing that we actually need to go in to do is we're going to go and we are going to go schedule these sections. So the way that we are handling sections is each department has their own inventory of items that they're going to be able to access. So I need to quickly refresh my page here. Sorry about that. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I'm sorry about that. We have something small, so a small adjustment. The course that I just created should immediately jump to right here. So apologies for that bug. But we will still show the scheduling of these items. So we can see that here that we have Earth and the Living Earth is another section within this department. Now we have, these are the items that are already scheduled for the given term. And then up here, we have any extra available rooms that Earth Environmental Science has available to them that they can potentially schedule rooms into. We have a couple of different ways we can do this. First, we can go in and actually unassign rooms ourselves. Now, a lot of what's going on here is going to be handled by our CAS, our Central Administrative Scheduler. And when the CAS gets in, she has full control over all of these different functions. But the ones that are within the departments, they can really just manipulate their own schedules using the rooms that they already have. And the way that they do that is by coming here and unassigning and then taking, for example, this 80-person room that I am going to add here. When I create, I am now going to see this this room get scheduled here here right for me. So we'll see that here. Additionally, if I don't have anything that was available here, I have a couple of other scheduling options that I can use. So I just created a schedule assignment there. But if I wanted to annotate this schedule and do something different, I can go in and say that I'm going to make this one departmentally assigned, where I'm going to come in and choose, these are the rooms that are available only to Earth and Environmental Sciences. These are some lab sections that are out there that we know are only for them, that the cast doesn't have capability. These are actually all labs. So this course isn't going to be set up as a lab. So I'm going to go back, and instead, I could put time only, but for this one, I'm just going to say by arrangement, which for Boston College means this course isn't going to get any schedule. We are basically saying this department is going to offer this course, and they're going to be, the instructor will make the connections directly with the students. Good examples of this are things like senior theses and independent studies, where they don't necessarily require a schedule. And then within here, we can actually see the list of items that we have for these, by arrangement courses, as well as some lab schedules and some other items. So once all of this is done, we're going to go back to our course offering list here, and take a look. Now I see down here on my I see a number of different courses here, including the one that we just scheduled a second ago. And I'm very sorry about that. The environmental issues and resources. And apologies. I'm sorry. So the living Earth one is the section that I actually wanted to go in and take a look at from my course offering list. So I'm going to go in and take a look at 1180. So within here, I'm going to go in and take another look at my course offering sections. And I see things like states and plans, and I'm going to go in and actually make this a, through my state change here, I'm going to make this, I can cancel it for a semester, or I can suspend it for a semester. So we have a number of different state management steps that we can take here as well, which will add some additional benefits to our next rollovers. A suspended course is something that we can have roll over from term to term, or we could have it not. It's all flexibility within our rollover manipulation. With that, that's kind of a general setup. And we have all of these that are in various states as well. So between planned and offered and draft. And once something is actually in our offered or planned state, we know it's going to roll over. But the departments are going to put it in a planned. And then once the cast determines that the courses are all ready for the given semester, they will run a state change in mass that will then get it into offered state, that will then prepare it for the registration. Thank you. Apologize for that one scheduling issue that we ran across. And I'm going to turn it back over to Linda and Tom.
All right, so Dan, if you stop sharing.
Oh, yep, sorry.
No problem. I will start up again. I'm sure if Dan had enough time, he could demo these applications for hours on end. There seem to be so many different facets to them. But I just wanted to just close with a little bit about the flexible options, particularly as this community begins thinking about the implementation study. And one thing I wanted to bring up, although Dan called it a department, where you saw a listing of course offerings, this is part of a generic mechanism that is part of the modeling in many of our services and growing. We call it cataloging. And the catalog of course offerings is called a SOC, and that was an acronym that was too good to pass up. So we decided it means sets of course offerings. And what a catalog does is it just provides a very flexible and either manual or rule-based way of making collections of objects for different purposes. So I'll give an example of the SOC catalog. I can have a spring 2021 set of course offerings for the history department that has all of their stuff. This provides a very simple way for us to kind of jump in and just zoom in on that set of course offerings without having to do searches on various criteria. And it also provides us a way on which to hang an authorization. And so we don't have to hang an authorization on each individual course offering to say, who can update it, for example, or, who could cancel it. We can hang that authorization at the SOC level. SOCs are hierarchical, as with all catalogs in EagleApps. And so this shows a bunch of departmental level SOCs on the bottom with a school level SOC, arts and sciences, up at top. And we can keep going. But these SOCs, we don't manually assign the courses to the SOC, so we have the option of doing that for doing some special case collections. Most often we just implement rules. And so the SOCs that we have are largely based on, at this level, looking at what organization is offering this and what term is it. And then it's when we retrieve course offerings by that set, we get all the ones that are relevant. So said differently, it's like having a baked-in query into the system that users don't have to type in themselves. All they need to do is select their SOC. We can keep going. We can include other schools. We eventually roll it up to something we call the Boston College SOC, of which we have one for every term. And we may then, in turn, do, over time, spring 2021, 2022, and so forth. There is a languages department, and they have subject areas within the department. So administratively, it's one department, but you have a bunch of languages under there, and those are subject areas. So we just include in the rule that says if there are more than one subject area that is underneath that organization, let's see that. And so the language department can look at all of their course offerings by selecting their departmental SOC, but they can also see other selections that say, I just want to focus on the French courses right now, and let me see that. So these catalogs, they're basically a way of controlling scope through the process of selection. And here we go. We've included some other terms. And when we talk about the course offering process, although people are generally working at one course offering at a time, we want to be able to roll it up and kind of see where we are, and see where we are and what the state of the term is in itself. So, in this case, okay, assuming it was next year, fall 2021, that SOC for Boston College means classes are in progress, might be one example state that we have there. In the summer of 2021, that's in draft. They maybe just did a rollover, just people are just starting to look at it and get things prepared. But maybe the spring 2021, that's inactive preparation. And so people are doing their scheduling and assigning their instructors and verifying what courses they're actually going to offer for that term. So that's at a high level, but we can drop down and maybe, for example, the law school wants to have a different registration period. and they want to push their SOC ahead of the rest of the pack. Sometimes that happens with the medical school or the law school, or in the case of Boston College, the Wood School. Just I don't know why this is doing this to me here. So the breaking down into smaller sets of course offerings and understanding their state, we can also drill down and see during the course offering editing process, well, perhaps which departments have marked their SOC as complete. Like, I'm ready to go. We did all our stuff. We're ready for registration. And maybe the next SOC over, well, maybe they still have a lot of work to do. And so it gives us a way of kind of tracking progress throughout the university. So these catalogs, and in particular, specifically these SOCs, are also a tool for delegation and managing a situation where things get broken up into a bunch of different departments and a bunch of different people, but then how do we manage it as a whole? Okay, get on to the next slide here. So the rules for how to create these catalogs in their hierarchical structure, and specifically the SOCs, are completely customizable. Anyone may inject their own code to do something a little bit different. The big advantage is it avoids tedious searching of the entire university by trying to look up attributes and select departments and orgs and people and times of day in order to find your stuff. So we can create a nice little folder for a small department and say, all of your stuff is here. Go find it. And it's very helpful for us to manage authorizations, as I've said before, and it works hand in hand with workflow or any kind of state model where we want to track the state of a set of these course offerings. A little bit about the academic calendar. The academic calendar, for all intents and purposes, is simply a collection of terms and milestones. Milestones are basically dates with names and descriptions. So therefore, the terms and the milestones may appear on multiple academic calendars. Now, Boston College has only implemented one academic calendar per academic year, but the system has the capability of managing multiple academic calendars in the same year. And that may be helpful for an institution that has a school, again, that's marching a little bit to its own beat, maybe by having different registration periods or maybe even different class periods. And consequently, we can go the other way and we can have academic calendars that span multiple years as well. So, it's, from a systems perspective, these things are really just collections of stuff, and we can arrange it any number of ways. The other thing where Dan was looking at pass, fail, and letter grades, all of these are called results, and they're managed in a learning result catalog. We tend to abbreviate that with LRC, and the job of the learning result catalog is to provide a place to manage all enumerated result values. And that's anything you can imagine: grades, test scores, SAT scores, GPAs, even degrees, certificates, badges. And these values can be grouped together. And so it was one of these result values groups that Dan was selecting from when he was selecting pass, fail, or grades. So even GPAs are enumerated. They can be done algorithmically, but they can also be enumerated so that we can define very clearly not just the precision in the learning result catalog of how many decimal places we need, but they can also be nonlinear, and they can be discontinuous. So maybe everything below a GPA of 1.0, we just count by a quarter of a point. And then everything above a 1.0, we count, we want to now start counting by 1/10 of a point. And all of that is possible in the learning result catalog. So when I'm defining a course of Math 1100, I get to select the result values group. In this case, I selected one that had some familiar letter grades into it. but maybe a different kind of course. And, you know, I have this kind of course that I use for freshman seminars. And maybe they're not intended to be for grades. And so I select a pass-fail option there. And the School of Management is doing some continuing education professional workshop where, you know, we're basically selling materials for working professionals, and they get to hang a certificate on their wall after they complete the course. Just a different kind of result from the system point of view. So in defining the curriculum, I might want to think about having different types. Remember the first session, we talked about every object has a type. That is one of the ways the system can be configured. And those types, one of the main jobs of a type is not just to identify what kind of thing it is, but we also link metadata and constraints and other rules to that type. So in this case, I assigned a type to each one of these types of courses. And now when I'm creating a credit course, maybe my only options are to do it for letters or do it for pass-fail. I don't have any other option. And maybe for a seminar, it's constrained so that I can only create it pass-fail and so forth. And so the type system and the constraints and what we're selecting, they could be woven together, not only to make data entry simpler and more robust, but also it helps us think about what kind of thing it is and what its purpose in life is. What we don't want to do is create a credit course and say, you're going to be graded on a professional teaching certificate, right? We don't want to mix those result values around. What do I have here? So before I do that, let me just give you a little picture of the learning result catalog here. And these are all the different result value groups that we have, and you see they're organized by scale, certificates, credits, endorsements, GPAs, grade scales, learning objectives for those proficiencies, so we can grade their competencies, standardized test scores. If I look at AP, there it is, their AP test scores, and we have a scale of 1 through 5, and each of these is a possible result value that can be assigned to a student who took an AP test. However, if they took the SATs as a different kind of test, we would link that to a different result values group that would have valid results for an SAT. It's lost my place here. Where was I? There we go. And the next one. The type system. So we can use that with metadata to constrain what the possible things that make sense for that type of course is, like credit values or other kind of result values. We could use it, as Dan showed, to constrain what it is that's even applicable in that particular situation. So we can kind of make things go invisible and visible based on the type. We can also begin to relate types together. Think about the course process going from the courses, which have structures of formats and activities, and then they all have offering counterparts. I can begin to simplify that process by creating these relationships in the system among the types. So for a credit course, I may already know that these are the only allowed activity types for a credit course, and maybe it's a lecture discussion group in a lab. And the course would have to fall under the appropriate type for the format as well. And maybe the executive workshop type only allows activity types of online learning or an in-class lecture. So I can begin to kind of hone in so that we're not looking at a whole morass of different possibilities when we already know what it is that we wanted to create in the first place. And similarly, I can use the same mechanism, and we do, to constrain what can happen on the offering side. And look at that, I spelled offering wrong. But on the left column, here are my curriculum activity types, and on the right are the activity offering or the section types. And maybe most often than not, it's kind of one for one. You know, lecture, discussion group. But here I just demonstrate that they can be different, and we can link them together. So for example, for lab, maybe we want to drill down in the offering because certain kind of labs require a certain special training session, orientation session, and we want to know that when people are registered there. And I can break that down into multiple smaller types. So I can mix and match a little bit, and it's really just saying what is allowed, and all of that is completely configured through the UI. And let me get my type UI up here. So here I've listed the activity types that are currently in the Boston College data set. And you can see there's everything from independent study, hybrid, lab, lecture, online, practicums, recitations, and studios. And then as I scroll down here, I can see some of its relationships. And the relationships that are actually popping up aren't talking about constraints, it's actually talking about a different kind of type that we use in the operation of the system, is that what does one produce? So what I snuck in here before, let me go back to this slide. That's a lot of activity type. So it's the format type column. And you see it's kind of echoing a little bit on what the activity type is. And so if we selected a lecture lab format type, the production type tells the system, you know what, they want a lecture and they want a lab. Please don't make them go create. Just make it happen. And so a lecture lab type produces an activity of a lecture and an activity of a lab, and that's automated in the system. And so that's one example that, you know, in our discussions and testing and back and forth, you know, we get feedback that something's a little too clunky, or something takes a little bit too much time, or the users don't know why they're doing this. It's a way for us to start now bringing automation and other types of rules to the table. And so we always are looking at mechanisms like this to implement that automation. So last note, Dan talked about scheduling a little bit. I just wanted to have a little note on this. I think this is several webinars in its own right. Scheduling is very complex, but it is actually a distinct area from course offering. And through the scheduling interfaces, the integration points, we can implement any number of things. And I listed some examples. In some cases, we can manually just say, this is when we're offering it, and it's going to be at this location. We can manage scheduling assignments in an external scheduling system like Astra, for example, or Schedule 25. We can say, well, we already did the scheduling all these years, and so whatever was kind of scheduled last term, why don't we just use those schedules this term and work from there, so we can copy them through the rollover process from a previous term. Or, you know, maybe you implement, using these interfaces, your own room allocation system. It says, you know, which departments can schedule or use that room at what times of day. It turns out that BC uses a little bit of all of the above. I was going to say it didn't offer number 2, but I know there's been some interest in at least doing reporting in an external scheduling system to sort of understand its room resourcing. So, you know, there's, in our world, you know, there's almost never this or that. It's always this and that and the other thing. So another huge area of customization, and probably going to be a very large concern for any implementation study of EagleApps, will be the scheduling area. And so with that, I will actually hand it over to Linda McCarthy, who will talk more about the implementation of curriculum management and course offering at Boston College.
And Tom, before you leave, I'm having a technical difficulty trying to input the answer to a question, so I thought I could read it and you could answer the question. So, given that courses have learning objectives, are fulfillments of objectives a type of learning result? And if so, can a student record display a grouped list of fulfilled learning objectives?
Yes, if we are tracking proficiencies on learning objectives, we should be able to display that. Boston College does a little bit of that today because that's how we track what languages a student understands and whether they understand that language natively or they have passed a second language test. They're all managed through learning objectives and proficiencies. And we'll probably see that in the future when we look deeper into students. But yes, results can be tracked and reported for learning objectives that are accomplished.
Thank you. All right, I have no slides. I'm Linda McCarthy. I am the ITS Technical Director for Student Academic Systems and work closely with Jen Mack, Dan Higgins, and a number of other people in the Student Services group. So as Mike Burke in his opening remarks talked about the fact that we were looking for a system that we could implement in a modular fashion, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the approach that Boston College has taken with the EagleApps system. So we first started, as Dan showed you, we implemented curriculum management courses. We moved the creation, the update, and the retirement of courses off of our mainframe system, which is 40+ years old right now. And we did 3 integrations with that course module. We integrated it to a system we call our operational data store. It's a system where other systems need to use specific pieces of data. So the source system would send that data up, and then any other systems could subscribe to that data. We also use this to help generate our course catalog. And the most important integration that we did was back to our mainframe, because as everything else on the student information system was still being done on the mainframe did need courses so that we could do our course offerings up there. We also did a workflow process through this curriculum management so that we could, as Dan showed you, you create the course. Because Dan's in student services, you didn't see where it ended up a course request would go to student services for them to approve. They could also send that back to the requester asking for some additional information. The second module that we implemented was our student account system. This is a system that allows us to generate charges, processes charges from other systems, it processes payments, it does refunds, and a whole host of other things. One of the huge benefits of putting this module in ahead of time was that it allowed the student accounts functional team to write and update the rules for their tuition and fee calcs. Previously, every time they needed a change, we would have to have a developer go into our PL1 code. And sometimes they would get a request to change tuition and fee rules, and they would go back, come back, say, first thing that they would say is, well, you know what, I have to go back to IT to see if that's even possible. So now they have full control over that. They test it. We have a process that they go through to get it migrated from dev to QA and ultimately up to production. We did more integrations to this with this module. Obviously, we had to integrate it back to the mainframe to take care of the rest of the items on the mainframe. We have a PeopleSoft financial systems, and we did an integration to that system. We have Nelnet as a vendor that helps us do refunds, payment processing, and we also have a variety of subsystems that supply charges to student accounts, such as health services, parking, library, and it has a direct integration between our financial aid system, which is a vendor product program, and student accounts. So as a student is getting a financial aid award, it goes over through a service to student accounts to go look and see how much, what are the charges that they have on their account, so that we're not giving them more financial aid than they're being charged for. The last thing I just want to quickly talk about is the plan that we have when we're going to start to roll out the enrollment modules, including the course offering, new version of CM courses. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow our academic calendar. So the first set of activities that we do to set up for a new year is really reviewing our courses, adding any courses that we need to, retiring those courses, doing the whole setup as Dan showed for the course offering. Then we'll do programs. We'll do the academic record. Now that's the place where you're going to be able to see what programs the student's in, some contact information, profile information, and a variety of other information. And that'll be in an upcoming session that we do. Advising, registration, and then the last two will be grading and graduation. So this system has made it very flexible for us to be able to implement it piece by piece, as opposed to be able, doing it all in a big bang approach. The other thing that it has helped us with is we also have a portal that we have different services that students use. And when we put the student accounts module in, the portal wouldn't have to rewrite code. They would just call the service to go grab whatever information that they either needed from the student accounts module or that they were sending to the student accounts module. All right, Tom, I don't know if you're next, or I'm going to turn it back to you or to Dale.
Okay, so I will hand it to Dale. I think we start our question and answer.
Yep, that would be great. So if anyone, we have answered a few questions throughout, and Linda picked up one live, so thank you for that. But if anyone does have any questions at this time, you can either submit them via chat or the Q&A button, and we'll try to address them. As you do that, I will also provide some additional logistics and help us to close down these sessions. Again, this is the first of all, thank you to Tom, Dan, and Linda, and the team behind the scenes who have worked to put these together with Dexterra and Boston College. This is the first of a series that really we wanted to make sure we could highlight and give you a sense of, or highlight a slice of, in this case, functionality. Our next session coming up is more on the technical side, to give you a sense of that with the customization and configuration of EagleApps. And then we continue with another functional area with program management and academic records. And then we will talk about, oops, sorry about that, wrong button. And then we will talk more about the EagleApps community implementation studies that we have folks who are interested in participating in. Again, as a reminder, we are growing a shared community with Boston College. Dexterra is leading it to really have folks from around the world who can be engaged in this community and provide guidance on the long-range plan, the model for implementation, support and maintenance, ongoing development, and the roadmap forward, and leading us to, again, the May 7th session about understanding what an implementation study is. We are eager and want all of you to be able to join with us in this community to help shape the future of this evolving next generation system. We do think it'll have an influence on the market and have the ability to change the market, but in particular allow institutions and educational entities greater control through an incremental deployment of this service-based approach. More details on the community are continuing to be provided. We are getting input from folks as well on how to shape that. Let me see if there are any questions that have come in. Does not look to be any. And I don't see any on the chat either. If anyone is wrong on that, I appreciate if you'll let me know. All of these recordings of our webinars, again, from the introductory session or the overview on the 19th of March, today's session and all to come will be posted on the EagleApps site within Dexterra, the EagleApps page within the Dexterra site. You can also email us directly at eagleapps@dexterra.org. We hope that you're able to join us for the next session. We would ask that you share this information with others in your network who may be interested in learning more about EagleApps. We seek to provide each of these sessions within 75 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the topic and the conversations that go on. But if there are no additional questions at this time, I want to thank you for joining Boston College and Dexterra for this EagleApps webinar event. We look forward to having you as part of our community going forward.